All right, here we go. Salute to NBA Nation on this Monday afternoon. Another edition of the NBA Report. CP the franchise in the building. On today's show, we're going to talk about a statement victory. This was a statement weekend, a statement for the Boston Celtics. You had statement victories by the Oklahoma City Thunder, and those Los Angeles Clippers are hot right now. So we're going to talk about that with our special guest today. He covers the NBA for ESPN, is also the chief content officer at basketballnews.com, formerly of Hoops Hype, formerly of USA Today Sports. This guy's everywhere, man. He is Alex Kennedy. Alex, welcome to the show, man. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. Thank you for that nice intro.
Yeah, and I gotta add one more thing. We gotta put respect on our guest name. The host of Running Up the Score podcast, fresh off the press. Gotta add that.
Thank you so much. I'm trying to get on your level. I love what you've built. I love your show. I think you do a fantastic job. You know the game so well. You get amazing guests. So, I'm just trying to get on your level here.
Appreciate it, man. Definitely appreciate it. And the respect is mutual, which is why I invited you on last minute. So thanks for joining. Let's kick it off with the Celtics and the Magic, two teams that you know very well. These two teams on a 2-game series over the weekend. I like how the NBA is setting up these 2-game matchups. I really like that. Number one, yes, you limit the travel, but you get to see after a first game, what are the adjustments that the losing team makes? What sticks out? What's different? What's trending? I like how the league has set up those 2-game matchups. But either way, in this one, it was all Boston. And in the first matchup between these two, the Celtics went small ball totally. No Porzingis, no Horford, no Luke Cornett, and their offense was still humming. Second game, you had those guys come back, and their offense is still humming, man. What were your takeaways from this weekend's matchup between the Celtics and the Magic from the Boston standpoint? Let's start there.
Yeah, this Celtics team is just so much fun to watch, and they're dominant at home. Right now, they're undefeated on the season, 14-0 at TD Garden. I just don't know how you beat this team at home because the home court advantage is excellent. I think I'm not super surprised the Magic lost these games. They've really struggled on the road. They've been much better at home this season than they have on the road. They're 5-7 on the road this season, 11-2 at home. So two teams that are much better at home, I would argue. I mean, obviously Boston, they're pretty good on the road too, but these teams are both dominant at home. This is a big win for Boston, though, because the Magic had won 4 straight against the Celtics team, including a few weeks ago, a blowout 17-point victory. I think this Magic team really gets up for games against Boston because not only is it like a great litmus test of where they are as a team, Paolo Banchero, I've talked to him about this. He said that, Jason Tatum was his favorite player growing up. They have a really close relationship. I know that ever since Paolo committed to Duke, Tatum kind of took him under his wing and really helped him. He helped him find an agent during the pre-draft process, helped him find a sneaker deal, and that's why Paolo ended up going with Jordan Brand, which Tatum also is under. So these guys are close, and I think Paolo really looks forward to these games because not only are they friends, it's like a friendly rivalry kind of thing, and again, it's his favorite player, so he really gets up for these games and wants to prove himself against his favorite player. So, I think the Magic are a tough matchup for the Celtics team. And that's something that Jalen Brown actually told me a few months ago. He talked about just the length and the size, the physicality of this Orlando team. And so I think Boston, they've been frustrated after these recent Orlando losses. The Magic they're very annoying. They have a lot of pests on their team, and their defense, their hustle, the effort's always there. So I think the Celtics team, it definitely was a statement win for them. They really wanted to get a victory, 2 victories over this Magic team, and they were able to do it. So I do think it's a combination of Orlando not quite being a good road team just yet, just especially with how young they are. But for Boston, the fact that they're undefeated at home says a lot. And I just love this team. One thing that stood out to me was the Magic seem to have stretches where one guy takes over. Like Paolo was incredible in the first half last night. He really got hot there, especially in the second quarter. And then there's certain games where like Franz takes over or Cole Anthony takes over. This Celtics team just seems like they're so well-rounded. And, you never know who's going to score the next basket. They have so many weapons that they can hit you with. It doesn't ever feel like one guy's kind of taking over. It just feels like the offense as a whole is kind of humming, and they kind of spread it around. So yeah, this team is very scary. I think they're the best team in the Eastern Conference right now, and I'm not super surprised that they won both these games.
That was my very next point that I was going to bring up is, this Boston team, they're 19-5 right now. Similar start to last year. But I think one of the biggest differences between last year and this year, as to why I feel like this is a sustainable, formidable force, is that they can hit you in so many different ways. I mean, yes, it starts with their superstars in Tatum and Brown and the way
Yeah.
that they can set the tone for the team. But, their starting five, when they're healthy with Porzingis, I think they're like second in net rating right now with teams with more than 200 minutes. I think they're only trailing Philadelphia. With Porzingis, you have five guys that can put the ball on the floor, five guys that can create for themselves, and that offense just continues to hum. I mean, even without Porzingis, they're
Yeah.
dangerous. Derek White. I mean, we talk about Tatum and Brown, but Derek White, he's a blur on both ends of the floor. Constant motion, constant energy. Defensively, he's a pest. He's a menace in that regard. I mean, I love the way that he's kind of just like that linchpin for that starting unit. And then off the bench, you have Pritchard playing very well. Hauser shooting the cover off the ball. I mean, it doesn't seem like this team necessarily has weaknesses, and that's why they're so dangerous as compared to last year.
Yeah, I know Tatum and Brown both had, 30-point games against Orlando, but really the top 8 guys in the rotation are stepping up and contributing. They're also a great two-way team. I think they're the only team in the NBA right now that's top 5 in both offensive rating and
Yeah.
defensive rating. They do it on both ends of the floor. So they may have fallen out of top 5 to like 6th on offense. They're right there. For most of the season, they've been top 5 on both ends, and they're the only team that can say that. So yeah, it's so tough. Even if you shut down like one aspect of their game or, one player, they have so many other guys that can step up and beat you. The depth is there. They just look like a really scary team. And I think also I always say this on my show, but I think one of the most underrated things in the NBA is continuity and chemistry. And obviously they made the Drew Holiday move in the offseason, but so many of these guys and the Kristaps Porzingis move. But when you look at Tatum and Brown, the role players there, a lot of these guys have been there for a while and they kind of have chemistry together. They know how to play with each other. And that makes it easier for guys like Drew and Kristaps to kind of step in whenever your focal points in Tatum and Brown have
Yeah.
been there for a
How about
while.
Horford?
So Horford, yeah. So I mean, I think that's a huge part of this too. I don't think it's a huge coincidence that right now Boston, you look at Denver, a lot of the top teams right now are teams that have that kind of chemistry and their focal points have been there for a while. So yeah, this Boston team has been so impressive. I think you're right about that's the biggest difference between last year and this year.
And so much in sports is focused on the end result, right? Can they get it? Can they win the big one? They came up short against Golden State, but I don't think we give them enough credit for year after year competing near the top of the East, hovered around Tatum and Brown, their growth, their development. And yes, they didn't win. They could have beaten Golden State, but Steph was truly magical, and maybe it's Golden State's championship caliber experience that got them over the hump. But I don't think we give enough credit for the Celtics for being there year after year. But with this team, what I think is very interesting is that as efficient they are from a shooting standpoint and dynamic as they are from offensively, they're still in the bottom quadrant in assists,
Mm.
right? And like 26 in assists, the 4th highest isolation frequency in the league. Is it still, yes, they have multiple guys that can beat you, but on a night where they're not shooting well, I still wonder, especially when it gets to the playoffs and maybe the threes aren't falling, I still wonder how do they adjust when things kind of tighten up.
Yeah, I actually found a great stat here. NBA.com, shout out John Schumann. He actually said,
Good job.
the win over Orlando was their second lowest 3-point rate of the season, and they still outscored the Magic by 18 points from beyond the arc. And 11 of their 12 games, or I'm sorry, here, when they've shot league average from 3, they're 12-0. I mean,
Hmm.
so even if they're not completely lights out from 3, if they're just average, they're undefeated
Yeah.
on the season. But again, 11 of those 12 games have been at home. They're a team that's much better at home than they are on the road. All 5 of their losses have come on the road. So yeah, I think this team, it's interesting. I think the fact that they have so many guys that can beat you is really what stands out. Just because again, if 1 or 2 guys have an off night, they have other guys that can just step right up and kind of ended up taking over the offense. And again, defensively too, they're able to kind of lean on that. Yeah, every night, even if your shot's not falling, the defense is there. So I don't know. I'm really not worried about this team. The Boston was my pick to come out of the Eastern Conference before the season. And I think everything I've seen so far this season is kind of I've just doubled down on that. I really think they're coming out of the East. And yeah, I think you're right too about the playoff experience. That doesn't get talked about enough because not only is that super important when it comes time for the postseason, but you also know what it's like to kind of pace yourself throughout a season and prepare
Yeah.
yourself for the postseason. Whereas a team like Orlando, that a lot of their guys in their roster have never been to the playoffs. So that's a lot tougher. They don't really understand what that's like to kind of get through a year and then still be ready for a deep postseason run. This Celtics team has been on so many of those now that I think that that's interesting too. So yeah, I'm a huge fan of this Boston team. I'm excited about Orlando going forward too. I think the next step for them is to make the playoffs and kind of get punched in the mouth. And I think there's gonna be so many lessons they can take away from a playoff loss. Again, this team, they're still extremely young. They're the fifth youngest team in the NBA. So the fact that they're playing so well this season, they're kind of ahead of schedule. And they're doing it with two guys that are two starters injured, Markelle Fultz and Wendell Carter Jr. So once those guys are back, and I think Fultz is the best facilitator on the team by far. I think that getting him back will really help, a lot of the offense and he'll be able to set guys up for easy baskets. And then that allows them to move Anthony Black and Goga back to the second unit so they get deeper. But yeah, I think this team just really needs to get to the playoffs. There's so many lessons they can kind of take away from a postseason loss. If they win, great, and they can go on a run, even more experience. But this Magic team, it's been really fun kind of watching this development. And there's not many teams in the league that have 2 6'10" point forward guys that can kind of create for themselves and others. Like it seems like right now, a lot of their games, either Paolo takes over or Franz takes over, kind of like I was mentioning. They're at their best when both guys are playing well. And I really hope that they can do a better job of kind of putting shooters around those guys going forward, because that's going to unleash them a little bit more too when it comes to their facilitating. So I love what Orlando has built. And I think it's really exciting watching such a young team play so well.
I think they're another team when you think about sustainable in terms of what they're accomplishing this season. And when I mean sustainable, I'm not saying, they're going to finish in top 3 in the East, but sustainable in terms of a team that can legitimately crack that top 8, and just this season being a litmus test season, not just like last year where they had good wins against Boston, they had statement wins and impressive wins against teams, but this year you really see them take another step up. And these losses to Boston, it's going to battle test them a little bit more. And I think that's what Jamal Mosley wants out of this team. You're seeing a tremendous amount of poise from Paolo Banchero in just his second year. I love the different looks that they can give you. You mentioned Paolo and Franz. Mo's kind of like that scrapper out there. He's that junkyard dog to do everything for them. I like the scoring dynamic that a Cole Anthony brings off of the bench. Jalen Suggs has been healthy so far this year, which is a great sign for them.
Yeah.
And I feel like he's like their emotional leader, even at a young age. You have Jonathan Isaac healthy, and he's trying to get into a groove. So I love this young team, man. They're trying to put something together here. As you said, shooting is certainly going to help them, but the experience as well and the chemistry with their coach on another year is going to help them as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I give a ton of credit to Jamal Mosley for the culture that he's kind of built there, where it's hard with a young team to be a top defensive unit where guys are, never taking plays off and hustling. Like that's tough with a very young team. And again, they're the 5th youngest team in the NBA, but they're also one of the best defensive teams. They have so much length. I think they lead the league in deflections and steals. Like there's always a limb in the passing lanes, and they're frustrating to play against because there's times where they're picking guys up full court. The effort's always there. And again, this is a team that is doing this without 2 starters. That doesn't get talked about enough. Beating Denver, beating Boston, going on a 9-game winning streak. So the depth really hasn't been there either, but getting those 2 guys back will be huge, especially Wendell. He's huge because he's a great rebounder, great screener, but then also he provides spacing in the starting lineup because he shot almost 40% from 3 last year. So he can, space the floor a little bit, and that helps Paolo, Franz, the other any kind of offensive piece on that team really benefits from that spacing. So yeah, I think that this is a really fun team. And shout out to Jalen Suggs. He was someone that was like at risk of being a bust, and Magic fans were fed up talking about how he, was a waste of a top draft pick. And now he is, like you said, he is their heart and soul. He is excellent defensively. He's even starting to get some like defensive player of the year buzz. Like he's not going to win it, but he'll get some votes, and it's been a lot of fun. I think it's always fun going to those games and just seeing him pump up the entire crowd. They get so fired up when he's diving for loose balls. He had like an altercation recently with Nikola Jokic, and the whole building went nuts. The building just, from that point on, they were going nuts. So it's a really fun team. It's not even just that they're winning games. It's a fun brand of basketball. And again, to your point about being sustainable, they're all very young. They're not going anywhere. Cole Anthony was recently extended. He was one guy that people were kind of wondering, is he going to move on? The only
Yeah.
guy that's really up after the season is Markelle Fultz. And again,
Right.
they have kind of his replacement already with you look at Jalen Suggs, Cole Anthony, Anthony Black, who was a lottery pick this year. And then they haven't really used Jet Howard, the other lottery pick from this
Right.
past
Right.
season,
G League.
because they're so deep. Yeah, he's been in the G League. So yeah, it's a really fun team. Mosley and the front office deserve credit for kind of putting this group together. Again, I really wanted to see them add shooting. They right now, it's not even if they're a bad shooting team. I mean, they're shooting a low percentage, but they attempt the fewest threes in the NBA.
Yeah.
They're not even trying to shoot.
Right. Right.
Paolo's I think Franz averages the most threes per game on the team with like 5, but he's shooting 20 something percent. And then Paolo's the only guy on the team shooting about 40% from 3. So when they actually get a shooter, and last year Gary Harris was their leading shooter, but he's not really shooting a lot this year. He changed over to the bench role, and he's still kind of adjusting to the new role. But if they had a shooter or two, I think this team would be much scarier. And I think that's what they thought Joe Ingles would be, but he's been more of like a facilitator, coach on the floor type. But yeah, I think going forward, they could be a really, really interesting team like 2-3 years from now.
Yeah, I totally agree on that. And once again, we're talking to Alex Kennedy, NBA contributor for ESPN, also the chief content officer for basketballnews.com. So to everybody in the chat, once again, hit that thumbs up button for you boys, hit the like button, share button, subscribe to the channel, the NBA Report. One more thing on this game, a lot of talk, a buzz about what will Boston do at the deadline. Will they make another aggressive move to bolster the bench? That was the biggest question mark I had coming into the season was, I thought there was a lot of reliance on Peyton Pritchard and Hauser and those guys, and give them credit because Pritchard's playing very well, and so is Hauser. He's shooting the cover off the ball. Do you think they get aggressive at the deadline and get a bench piece? A lot of people think of John Collins. What do you think?
Yeah, it's interesting. There's so many buyers this season and so few sellers. I know Jake Fisher of Yahoo Sports has written about that. And so I think you're going to have a lot of these teams, especially with the play-in. There's been way fewer teams that are willing to kind of just say, okay, we're not going to be good this year. Let's just sell off pieces. So that's tough. I know Isaiah Stewart was someone that has been linked to Boston. There was a report today about that they've shown interest in him. And Detroit, you look at just what's happening there. They're one of the few teams that you can kind of look at and say they're definitely going to be a seller. I'd imagine. But yeah, there's so few sellers that it's kind of tough. I saw the rumor about John Collins and, how they're kind of frustrated with him on both ends and that he might be available. But I do wonder what their asking price would be for him. I do think if you're a team like Boston and just how well they're playing, and you look at the Eastern Conference right now, I think this would be the year to kind of try to go all in and try to, make that kind of move to pursue a championship. But it's just tough trying to find those sellers. In the past, that was the one thing with the play-in. There was always so much activity at the trade deadline. It was so much fun. We'd all react to all the moves. And now it feels like there's a lot of rumors, but very few moves actually get done, which is kind of a bummer. But yeah, if they can find a trade partner and they can go add, especially like a big, I think, Collins, Stewart, those kind of type of players, it would make a lot of sense. I think that would be very smart of them.
True indeed. And, as much as Porzingis changes that team, the durability is always going to come into question. That's the only drawback with Porzingis. I mean, he's as dynamic as he's been with them. You just never know, especially with the lower extremity injury. So let's see which way they go. But we've been talking about a lot of statements and sustainability. We got to talk about those OKC Thunder, man, because on Saturday night, OKC would head into the Mile High City against the champs, back with Jamal Murray, and this game was wild, man. You had the Nuggets with double-digit leads deep into the fourth quarter, and then from there, OKC's big three took over. You had signature blocks from Chet Holmgren, Jalen Williams adding in some couple signature plays in crunch time, 24 points for Jalen Williams, Chet Holmgren, 17 points, 11 rebounds, 9 block shots. And when they needed the bucket, who else do they go to but their guy? Ice water in his veins. The closer, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, man, with 8 seconds left, steps into his shot, gets a turnaround jumper, and they literally just walks off the court after they deflect the Nuggets inbound pass. Hey, Thunder, 118-117, second in the West. Statement signature victory this year against the champs, man. What was your impressions about this game?
That was a huge win for this team. And I think I had Jalen Williams on my podcast a couple weeks ago, and he was talking about how so much of the talk about this Thunder team is about the future draft picks and everything. Like, you hear nationally, oh, they have X number of first round picks over the next 5 years. And I get it. Like, it's very exciting to see how many picks they have. And everyone's wondering, okay, what are they going to do? Are they going to trade some of these picks for a key player now? Are they going to just keep drafting guys and kind of hope they fit in with this core? But enough talk all season long and entering the season, no one was talking about just that this team could win right now and the group that they have currently. And it is a fun team. I think Chet has fit perfectly with this group, and it's a bummer that he missed last season with his injury. But he has been fantastic, and I think he really benefited from last year, even though he wasn't able to play, just being behind the scenes and being with NBA strength and conditioning coaches and kind of having those NBA resources, and just kind of watching and learning from coaches and everything. I think that really helped him. SGA, I mean, he's become one of the best players in the league, one of the best guards in the league, especially. I mean, you can't really argue that. He's just so dominant as a driver, even when his shot's not falling from three. I think over the last 5 games, he's 1 of 11 from three, but he's still able to dominate because he can just get to the rim and, create for others. So I love this core that they have in place. Again, you go back to like sustainable young cores, this team's not going anywhere. And even if they do lose like one piece, like, if there's someone that they're not able to afford, they have so many draft picks that they're going to be able to replace those guys pretty easily. So yeah, I think this team's going to be very good for a long time. It kind of reminds me of Orlando and just being a team that's ahead of schedule. Like, I think a lot of people expected this team to be a contender eventually, just because with all the young players and assets that they have. But to do it this year, for a while there, Orlando and OKC were both third in their respective conference. Like, that is crazy to see both of these teams kind of already winning games. So yeah, and then to beat a team like Denver, that is huge as a confidence booster. That just says a ton for this team in terms of where they're at. And I think it's great for them too, because they're going to get more attention and more love nationally. Like, obviously they're near the top of the standings, but to beat a team like Denver says a lot. So yeah, it's a lot of fun watching this team. Again, another team that not only are they winning games, they're a really, really fun team to watch. And I wish the NBA would put teams like Orlando or OKC or Indiana like on national TV more, because they're not getting enough attention.
Yeah, no question about it, man. And I remember vividly 2 years ago, I was at Summer League watching Chet in his debut, and I was speaking to a one of my co-hosts over at NBA Radio and Sirius XM, former NBA great in his own right. But we were sitting there talking on the baseline, and I was just getting his thoughts on this OKC team, and he's like, look, they got some promising young players. The only question is when will Presti, basically in lesser words, when will Presti decide to stop tanking and start fielding a competitive team out there? And like you said, we don't give enough time for chemistry to build, stability, year after year growth. And here you are. You look at this team, and yes, SGA was a traded acquisition, but he's been there for such a minute now. I almost consider him a core piece, obviously a core piece, but almost like homegrown. But then look around him, and it's Jalen Williams, homegrown. It's Chet, who's transformed their defense, homegrown. I mean, you look at guys night in and night out that are just running around. Their depth is so incredible. One night it might be Isaiah Joe. Next night it's Ousmane Deng. It's Wiggins. It's Kenrick Williams. They just can throw so much at you, so much young talent. But that core of SGA, J. Will, and Chet, that's it. That's it. You got to be careful when you're thinking about what they should upgrade with. I don't want to see Jalen Williams lead this team, man. I don't want to see.
That's the thing. Like, they're going to have many opportunities to land other star players, and whether it's through trade. I mean, right now, if they were to pick up a phone and call any GM in the league, they can put together the best offer, the best trade offer, depending on how much they're willing to give up, obviously. But if they wanted to, they could just drop a bunch of first round picks on the table and they beat every offer. So if a player becomes available, they can, be at the front of the line there. And then just as far as I think one thing that doesn't get talked about enough is they do a great job at not only recognizing draft studs. You know, they do a great job of finding guys at the top of the draft, but also finding like diamonds in the rough. But they
Yeah.
also develop players so well. This is dating back to like the Kevin Durant, James Harden, Russell Westbrook days. They do a great job of like putting each player on like a custom developmental plan, not only working on them, you know, working on like their skills and on-court stuff, but like from a nutrition standpoint, a sleep standpoint. That's one of the things I've heard from multiple players, that, you know, they just really all facets of their life, not even just their game, they really help them kind of maximize their potential. So when a guy lands there, I know there were rumors that Chet wanted to go to OKC so bad that like he left his Orlando meeting and workout early. Like he wanted to be in OKC that badly that he didn't even finish his workout and then didn't even go to the dinner that was like scheduled afterwards with the Magic front office because he wanted to be in OKC. And again, for a team like OKC, a small market team, that says a lot. And I think it's because they have such a reputation for maximizing guys' potential. Obviously, he saw the opportunity that was there as far as playing time and all that. But I just think they deserve a ton of credit for not only finding these guys in the draft, but also helping them kind of maximize their potential there with everything they do in these custom developmental plans. But yeah, I mean, Chet, I've been so impressed with him too. I thought he'd be dominant defensively from day one, just because he's always been a great defender. But the fact that he's averaging 17 points, shooting, you know, almost 37% from three, shooting 53% from the field, like that's really impressive for a guy that's known for his defense. The fact that he's been so impactful offensively. So yeah, I agree with you. I think this young core, it's really interesting to see what Sam Presti's going to do, because this young core is already so good that what, you know, they have all these picks, but like even if they didn't have any picks over the next couple of drafts, we're talking about the Thunder as being like a great contender probably once this core kind of reaches their full potential. So I don't know. To your point, you don't want to mess it up with a trade. You don't want to mess it up by bringing in the wrong pieces. But it's also a great problem to have.
Yeah. And as you said, you already expected him to give them a lift defensively, but offensively, he looks like a vet, man.
It's crazy.
And it's not just as a rim runner. He's legitimately turning into a guy that you can rely on to get you points in crunch time, because he has almost that similar poise that SGA has as your point guard. So now you have two pillars of your team that have established themselves as go-to guys that everybody else can kind of just play around and play their roles. And it's just impressive. Now, the 9 blocks, I mean, the one that he had on Aaron Gordon in crunch, when crunch time started, about 5 minutes left in the game, where Aaron Gordon thinks he's got him beat, and Chet just gobbles that thing up, man. I mean, that to me was the turning point of that game. And even though there were several lead changes by that point, it almost just felt like OKC at that point was like, all right, just a couple more right here. We got this. And they took it home, man, with SGA at the end.
100%. I think when you have a guy that can block shots like that, obviously it's early in his career, so guys are still going at him. But as he continues to play well, and eventually I'm guessing he's going to get, you know, all defensive team honors of the season, he's going to start getting buzz as he continues in his career as like a defensive player candidate, defense player of the year candidate. Teams are going to start going away from him. Like it's like the Rudy Gobert effect, where guys just won't go in the paint or attempt shots near him because he's such a good shot blocker. And that's going to happen. And I think the fact I mentioned earlier that Boston was top 5 in offense and defense, the next closest team is OKC. They're number 7 in offense and defense. So to be doing that as such a young team is just so wild. And I think Chet is a huge reason for that defense being up to number 7. Let me see. I'm curious what they were last year. That's a interesting.
Their defense last year?
Last year, I have it. They were
like 14,
number 16 last year. 16, yeah. Or tied 16. For 15 with New York, actually.
There you go. Yeah.
So so there we go. So to go from that to now being, you know, a top 7 defense, I think that's almost entirely Chet, and, you know, probably some internal development from others, but he's been such a game changer for them. He's such a perfect fit for today's modern NBA too. A guy that can block 3 shots a game and then go knock down threes. I mean, every single team is looking for that kind of guy.
They were 19th last year in opponent's 2-point percentage. This year, they're 4th.
Wow.
10th last year in opponent shooting at the rim. This year, they're 4th.
And he's 5th best in the league in whenever he's the closest defender in terms of like the opponent field goal percentage. I saw that earlier today too. So, I mean, and to do that as a rookie, again, it's so hard. Typically young guys have a hard time defending at a high level because they have a hard time adjusting to the speed of the game, the competition level. For him to do this as a rookie, there's so many rookies in this year's class that are defending at a really high rate. You look at Wemby, Asar Thompson, Craig Porter Jr. in Cleveland had that stretch where he was
Yeah,
playing
yeah,
really well. There's a lot of really good defenders in this class, which is, that's usually not the norm. It usually takes rookies like, at least half a season or a year to
yeah.
really get comfortable defending. But it just shows how talented these guys are as defenders.
A lot of the talented defenders. I mean, Casey Wallace,
Yeah.
teammate at Chet on OKC as well. And then in that game, there's the dynamic in terms of Chet at the 5, Chet at the 4, whatever the case may be. Saturday night, you had big Jalen Williams take on some of the Jokic assignment. Chet still had to handle some of it, but yeah, big Jalen Williams take on Jokic. He himself spreading the floor 3 or 4 from downtown. What do you
Yeah.
like about that dynamic with their ability to go smaller with Chet and then go bigger with big Jalen Williams?
I love it. So I should specify, big Jalen Williams was the one that was on my show. And
Oh, okay. All
I
right.
was able to talk to him about that a little bit. And he's always been
Yeah.
a fan of Chet. They've known each other for years, just from playing against each other in high school and things like that. So
Hmm.
when they drafted Chet, he had told me, this is like a once in a generation type talent. He was really high on Chet. And then he said last year, they saw like flashes from Chet behind the scenes when he was working out. And they were all just like so excited to get this guy healthy because they knew what he'd be for, as far as a difference maker for this team. But yeah, I love the fact that they have him to turn to. He's one of those guys that you love to have on your team, but you hate to play against because he's always drawing charges.
Yeah.
He's a great defender, good rebounder. Again, it just goes back to this team not only has really good star players, but because they've been able to hit on draft picks and develop guys, their role players are really good too. I'm a big Lou Dort fan. I think they have a lot of guys that kind of fill their roles well and kind of star in their role. And that's only going to continue. Like if they continue to add guys through the draft, I'm sure they're going to just try to piece guys around this core that they have. So they're going to be able to find, more specialists and role players and kind of help maximize their potential. But yeah, I love that duo. I think they really complement each other nicely. And it seems like they get along really well off the court too, which is great. Both of these teams, kind of drawing comparisons again between Orlando and OKC, they remind me of like a college program. And I think it's part of being such a young team. Like sometimes you look at, some of these older teams where guys have family and kids and they don't really hang out as much. But when you're, the youngest team in the league and the 5th youngest team in the league, I think that's what these teams are. All these guys are kind of at the same like stage of their life where, they don't have families. A lot of them aren't married. So they spend a ton of time together. And like this Orlando team, I've been around them. A lot of teams too, they're teammates, but they're competing for the same minutes. They're competing for the same, slice of the salary cap.
Yeah.
I just talked about this with CJ Miles on my show, and he was saying that like there's relationships in an NBA locker room, but they're very complex. And he was talking about when he entered the league in Utah out of high school, he was coming in like, oh, these guys are going to be my best friends. And they were like, you're trying to take our job and take our money. And he was like, that was a total shock to me. Whereas like you look in Orlando, Cole Anthony gets his extension and they all took him out to dinner and had this big celebration. Like it feels like a family almost. And I know that gets thrown around like it's a cliche thing, but I do think when it's a young group, it happens more often, I would say. Like I've seen that happen a number of times now over the years. And it's always these younger teams where it kind of feels like a college program and guys kind of root for each other and they don't really view it that way of like, hey, you're coming for my job. And it's usually like, oh, let me celebrate my teammate's success. I think you see that in both Orlando and OKC where the guys seem really close. They do hold each other accountable, but it feels like a family and like a close-knit team. So that's also something that I've kind of spotted in both of these teams in their ascent so far.
Very interesting indeed, man. OKC, that is my league pass team.
Yeah.
And they are legit. So let's see if they can keep it going. Once again, salute to everybody in the chat. Hit that thumbs up button for you boys. CP the Franchise here. Special guest Alex Kennedy, NBA content contributor for ESPN, as well as the chief content officer of basketballnews.com. CP the Franchise here. Remember that the show is presented by PrizePicks. Go to PrizePicks.com. Use our code MBAR for an instant deposit match of up to $100. Or you can hit the link in the video description and it'll take you right there. You can download the app and play along today. Now, Friday, guys, I've been a bridesmaid several days in a row, typically getting like one wrong on my sheets. And it was another situation like that on Friday. Still won some cash, but I just had one off. I went with Jalen Brunson on Friday with more than 24.5 points against the Phoenix Suns. That was my lock of the night. And as we know, he dropped a 50-piece on the Suns. In that same game, I went with Josh Hart with less than 16.5 points, rebounds, and assists. I got that one. Josh Hart finishing with 10. Had a good first half, but tailed off in the second. Also in this game, with the Knicks defense kind of being a shell of itself, one of the worst defenses in the league right now, trending that way. I went with Kevin Durant with more than 27.5 points. It is KD. Knicks hadn't beaten KD in over 10 games, and KD dropped 29. So I did get that. The one I missed out on was RJ Barrett with more than 3.5 rebounds. Broadway, typically a good rebounder. I thought he was good for about 5 in this game, but only finished with 2. So ruining a perfect night for CP. Still got 4 out of 5. And at near the end of the show, we'll get into tonight's picks. But make sure you guys support our sponsors, PrizePicks.com. Promo code MBAR, instant deposit match of up to $100. Now, speaking of the team that the Knicks lost to over the weekend, the red hot Los Angeles Clippers, Alex, 15-10 on the campaign right now, 7 straight victories. Hey, they were clowning the move when Harden went there. They were clowning the move. They had lost 6 straight. Oh, this is going to be a disaster. It's going to blow up. And now that starting 5 is one of the best net ratings in the league. They've won 7 straight games. Kawhi Leonard's been tearing it up, 33 points per game in his last 5. Are you buying the Clippers right now? Are they legit in the West? What say you?
So here's what I'll say. I think there's a middle ground here. People were clowning on the Clippers when they started 0-5 after the James Harden acquisition, but I was kind of like, okay, you added a focal point, a guy that really changes your team. So I wasn't going to overreact to that early stretch where they were struggling. I'm also not going to overreact to this 7-game winning streak because while it has been impressive, and I do agree with you, Kawhi Leonard is playing out of his mind, not only averaging that many points, but he's been doing it so efficiently, averaging, shooting 66% from 2, 62% from 3, 95% from the line. And if you look at the full season, he's shooting a career high true shooting percentage. Like, he has been super efficient. And I think having Harden helps him offensively too. So I don't hate this team, but I also don't want to overreact and say, oh, they're, one of the top teams in the West now. If you look, 6 of the 7 wins have been at home, and 4 of the games that they've won have been against teams that have a losing record. So, and they almost lost to the Blazers. That was a tough one. And the Blazers were shorthanded too. So I don't know. I think that close call was interesting. I think as the season goes on and they kind of get used to playing together, this team could be good. And, I wouldn't be surprised if entering the playoffs, they're a team that's better than the record indicates. But I don't think that, the rest of the way it's going to just be super easy for this team. I honestly think this week is going to be really telling because they have 3 road games in a row now against Indiana, Dallas, and OKC, and then they play Boston at home. So I think if they, after this week, if they're able to win 2 or 3 of those games, then I'll be like, okay, maybe this team is legit. But I want to see them against some winning teams since they've been doing this at home against, struggling teams. I think this week's going to tell us a lot. Again, I do think there's a lot to be excited about. Offensively, they look incredible recently. I think over their last 5 games, they have been, I forget the numbers, but it's been their best offensive stretch of the season. And you have not even the starting lineup. Obviously, we've seen the starters are playing well, but you have a guy like Norm Powell that's been playing really well off the bench too. And I think even going back to his Toronto days, he's always been a guy that's been better kind of coming off the bench, leading a second unit versus starting. And so, I mean, Norm Powell was kind of finding his rhythm too. Kawhi's playing out of his mind. James Harden's starting to get comfortable. I don't know. I think this team is playing really well, but I want to see them do it against some winning teams and do it on the road too. And if they can do that, then I think I'll be sold. But again, I didn't overreact to the start, and I don't really want to overreact to this stretch, but I just need to see a little bit more, I think.
I'm going to put a little money down, Alex. I don't know if I'm buying all the way. I think I'm going to put some down, a little layaway plan, and then come back, midway point of the season. But I'm starting to believe, man. I told people, I said, listen, we got to allow for continuity, allow for chemistry. We don't do it in this day and age where we want to see these super teams just go straight to the moon all the way. It doesn't work that way. You got to work out the kinks. First and foremost, you have to figure out a rotation. Ty Lue seems to be getting there. Love Terrence Mann. Norman Powell is killing it off the bench. He's been one of my favorite reserves for a long time. A couple years ago, actually, I wanted him on the Knicks over Fournier, but the Blazers decided to give him a 5-year deal. I guess Knicks, give him Fournier the 4-year deal. Maybe that was the equalizer. But either way, Tice, I like the Tice pickup. I feel like they've been able to kind of patch up the loss to Plumlee with Tice coming off of the bench. Kawhi doesn't have to do everything by himself now.
Yeah.
It's got help. Harden is starting to settle in. And the biggest need for the Clippers over the years during that PG and Kawhi tandem has been finding someone that can get them shots, finding someone that can get them easier shots and rhythm, and an offense that can flow where it's just not dumping it down to them and making them make a move. Now you can flow the offense through a number of ways, whether it's through Harden, it's through PG, it's through Kawhi Leonard, and they're attacking the basket. I love their size. Like I just see like different elements that I feel like, if they're healthy, they should be formidable if they can stay healthy. But you're right. This stretch where they face, probably the best offenses in the league, in the Pacers, you got the Mavs, you got the Thunder, you got the Celtics. That I think that is going to be the bigger test than what we see, through the 7-game win streak.
Yeah, I'm interested to see how they do in those games. Again, not only on the road, but against good teams. We just talked about OKC, Boston. I've been impressed with Indiana this year. Dallas has a lot of talent. So I'm curious to see how those games go. But I've been impressed with James Harden. He's shooting 41.2% from three in the 20 games since he joined the Clippers. He's been pretty efficient. The assists have been there. I think that was the thing. Whenever he joined this team, all the jokes were about, oh, he's going to jack up a ton of shots and take the ball out of Kawhi and PG's hands. But to your point, he's a guy that's he's a facilitator. He's a guy that's been averaging, 10 plus assists in the last 3 years. I mean, he's a guy that's one of the best facilitators when he's in that role. We've seen in the past he can be that great offensive player, but now in his career he's more of a facilitator and can set up Kawhi and PG and guys for easy buckets. So yeah, I think the move was interesting. I also think that Kawhi and PG wanted this, and that's another reason why we saw Harden get acquired.
Yeah.
Both of those guys can hit free agency after this season, and so I'd imagine those guys were involved in those conversations too. And to your point, they've needed that kind of facilitator for a while. That's been what they've been kind of missing. So I'd imagine those guys kind of made it clear we want to go get James Harden, and so they did it. And I wouldn't be surprised if all three of those guys are back next year when they're free agents. They may have had some kind of under the table little agreement there, like, yeah, we'll give this more than 1 year. But yeah, I think the team has talent. They have depth, which is important. I still believe in Ty Lue as a coach. I think he's always, been a really good X's and O's guy. He's been great at, making adjustments. He's a great leader. Guys love him. You talk to guys that played for Ty Lue and they have nothing but positive things to say about him. I know some Clipper fans have been frustrated over the last year, with his coaching a bit and rotations and stuff like that, but I still believe in him as a coach. So yeah, I'm close. I'm close to being willing to put money down.
Put it
But
on the layaway.
yeah, that's the way to look at it. I
There
think
you
you're
go.
right. So we'll see, in a couple of weeks, circle
Yeah.
back and we'll see how we feel about this Clippers team.
And I have to imagine, I mean, look, when it comes to the marketing of this new stadium, it'd be better to show the locals, hey, we're building this thing with 4 local products, 4 California kids, than
Great
to
point.
say, hey, we got nobody here. Sign up for your season ticket plan. Oh, that'll be $1,000 a game. Like, you got to give us a little something to work with. So I'm sure in the back of Bomber's head that's part of the plan and part of the appeal.
See, those things don't get talked about enough because I guarantee you that conversation was had. Whenever you have a new stadium and you're trying to get people to, buy season tickets, that's 100% things that, that factors into the decision. Obviously, we all look at the basketball component and the on-court fit and things like that, but they are trying to make money. This is a business. So yeah, from a marketing standpoint and just like a star power, like there are casual NBA fans that are like, oh, do I want to go to a game? Oh, wow. They have James Harden and Russell Westbrook now too, in addition to Kawhi Leonard and PG. Like, that's going to get casual fans interested as well. So yeah, there's definitely a money component here too, where you can sell those season tickets and get casual fans or just people that are visiting LA, get them to stop by for a game anytime, especially when a new stadium goes up. Those conversations happen even more, I would say. So yeah, I think you're onto something there.
For sure. And shout out to the Rhyme Animal Chuck D in the chat. Says they all want to be part of that new LA Arena grand opening, no doubt. LA guys. Yeah, man. And Chuck is definitely close to the action out there in Inglewood. He also sends a $5 super chat and says Westbrook is comfortable in his role. He's like a finisher and a supercharger of energy. What's been your thoughts of Brody coming off the bench, man?
See, I've always been a big Russell Westbrook fan. I feel like he's always been very misunderstood. And I know there's a lot, I think the way he kind of interacts with the media too leads to him maybe not getting the credit or like love that maybe he should. But I've always thought he's the kind of guy that never takes plays off. He's diving for loose balls. Teammates rave about him. We did a story at Basketball News a few years ago. It was when he was in Washington still, but we talked to a bunch of his teammates and they were just talking about how he's like a big brother to the younger players. He's a great leader in the locker room. Like you talk to people who actually spend time around Russ, his coaches, and they rave about him. Obviously I understand the Lakers experiment didn't go well and that was frustrating, but I think to your point, he has accepted this role and he's playing really well in it. So, and again, that was always the criticism too, like, oh, he wants to be the star. He's not going to accept the role, but he's showing that he's willing to do it. And that's always tough for guys. Like we're talking about a
Yeah.
former MVP. There have been plenty of guys who just never accept that lesser role or accept a bench role.
Ego, man.
Yeah, the ego. It's tough to kind of do that. I get when you've been dominating your whole career and putting up unprecedented numbers, you're going to have a hard time when a coach tells you, hey, we're better when you're not starting games. Like that's tough, but he's been willing to do it. I give him a ton of credit. Again, I think he's very misunderstood and his teammates love him. You hear nothing but great things. And then I think this is a great, chapter of his career now to be able to say he was willing to accept that lesser role, do what's best for the team, sacrifice. And again, if this team ends up going on like a deep playoff run, I think he's going to be a big part of it. I'm really happy for Russ. And I think he kind of landed in the perfect situation after everything he had to go through with the Lakers stuff. It seems like this is a much better fit for him, better situation. He has, support from everyone, from the players to the coaches to the front office. So yeah, I think he's been great in that role and I'm happy for him.
Absolutely. Now, next topic, Draymond Green. It was announced today that I think it was Shams who reported it. Draymond Green will be out at least another 3 weeks as he rehabs his reputation and gets himself in order, checks his behavior. I think he has to do some counseling. They haven't really specified what he needs to do to satisfy their requirements to get back onto the court. But according to Shams, he's out 3 weeks. What do you think about Draymond and the Dubs? What do you think about the Dubs going forward?
Yeah, with Draymond, it's very rare to see the NBA have an indefinite suspension for someone. That's very, very rare. Like, I feel like the only time I've really seen something like that is, you look at like the Malice of the Palace, and
Yeah.
then you look at like when a guy fails the anti-drug program
Right.
and they have to get reinstated after a year or something. But usually they say this player is, I think it's dismissed and disqualified is the verbiage they use, and then the guy has to get reinstated. But for it to be an indefinite suspension, we saw afterwards things came out like, oh, there might be a certain amount of counseling that's required. He has to kind of get in compliance and do that counseling before he can come back. I think the NBA sent a really strong message and basically said, we're taking this seriously, especially if you look at it. The incident with Nurkic, if that was a different player, we're probably talking about a 1 or 2 game suspension. But they made it clear in the announcement, this is because of a history of unsportsmanlike acts. And if you do this, and basically with the indefinite suspension, they're saying you are on very thin ice going forward, like once you come back. Because I don't know what happens after an indefinite suspension.
Right. What happens after that?
Is it a year-long suspension? Is it another indefinite suspension where you're just out for a significant period of time? Like, I don't know. But by sending that message now, they're basically saying, it won't take some crazy incident like the Gobert choking incident.
Right.
It's if you have even a punch or something that maybe another player would be suspended 1 or 2 games for, we're going to suspend you indefinitely or for a year. So it's a strong message sent by the league. I do think that there's something to this storyline about Draymond, like about maybe something going on in his personal life. And I don't really want to speculate on what's going on, but throughout his career, he's always been a player that kind of like goes right up to the line and then doesn't cross it. But these most recent incidences feel like they're way more intense and he's crossing the line way more frequently. And that's as he gets older. Usually it's kind of the opposite. Like you look at like someone like Rasheed Wallace, he mellowed out. And started getting way fewer technicals as he got older. Whereas Draymond, I think must be something going on that's, off the court or something like that, because it's kind of rare to see a guy get older and have more of these kind of issues or altercations and stuff. So yeah, I if there is something going on with him, I hope, he kind of is getting the help he needs and hopefully, whatever it is isn't too serious or it passes, but he also has to do a better job of controlling these outbursts. Like it hurts the team. It's hurting his own career. It's hurting his reputation. I think he already has a certain perception, and the more things like this that happen, or the more suspensions that happen, it's only going to hurt his reputation and his image, like you said, more. So yeah, I don't know. I think maybe I'm also not sure that 3 weeks is really going to fix this. Like,
Yeah.
if he goes to a therapist or for 3 weeks or whatever it is, is that really going to just be a night and day difference right when he comes back? Like, who knows? I mean, maybe again, if there is something in his personal life that gets kind of figured out, maybe that will be a difference. But I'm curious to see kind of what happens from here. As for this Warriors team, it's tough for them because they have the highest payroll in the NBA. They're paying a big luxury tax bill for this team, and it just doesn't seem like the team's going anywhere. Like, they might miss the playoffs and pay a ton of money to do so.
Yeah.
They're a team that was fine paying the luxury tax whenever they were, competing for championships,
Right.
but I guarantee that's a different conversation that's happening behind closed doors when you're paying that kind of luxury tax bill for a team that may not make the playoffs. And then they kind of went all in on this group. Like, Draymond got a big deal. It's going to be interesting to see going forward what they do. I had Ben Golliver on my show recently, and he was saying he wouldn't be surprised if we see them kind of pivot and start focusing on developing the young guys, maybe try to move some guys and kind of cut costs, because again, it only makes sense to kind of go into luxury tax if you're a team that's contending, because next thing you know, they're going to be getting hit with the repeater tax and the new
Yeah.
CBA. The punishments for teams that are in the luxury tax are so strict, especially if you're a repeater tax team. So I don't know, man. I think they're in a really, really tough spot.
Yeah.
And I'm curious to see where they kind of go from here, because they've just been really struggling this year. And I don't know there's an easy solution to kind of get out of this.
Which is why the way the salary cap implications are with the new second apron, if you're not close to being legit, you got to peel that thing back, man.
Yeah.
Because you're so handcuffed from building going forward. If you don't have the real deal on your roster with your roster, you got to move it back. And that's why I think, yes, the Draymond thing from a personal player side, get everything right, get everything together. But from a basketball standpoint, I think this could be a blessing in disguise for the Warriors, because the whole running it back idea was terrible to begin with. They're old, they're getting less and less durable, and they don't have that secondary option next to Steph. It's time for them to really enact that succession plan, see what they have right now and what they need going forward. You got Pajemski playing with a ball of energy. Kuminga's been up and down. Moody's been showing his flashes. Get Jackson Davis some more playing time. Like, I think it's good that you've got Draymond missing time. You got Wiggins being ineffective. So now you can force Kerr's hand to get these guys some meaningful minutes. He's starting to see that in terms of how impactful they are. It's not a CP3 issue. I think he's been fine, but I think it's holistically, where is this team going? And now you're seeing that it's falling apart fast.
I agree. And I think this is an opportunity for Mike Dunleavy Jr., the new GM there, to kind of put his own fingerprints on this team, because, we could see him try to make some moves. Again, we just talked about it earlier. There's going to be a ton of buyers at this deadline and very few sellers. Could the Warriors be one of those few sellers that emerge? And I think it's a great time to be a seller, because when you're one of the only teams that's selling off pieces and you have a ton of buyers that are bidding for your assets, you're going to get a good return on some of these players. So yeah, I think Dunleavy could actually potentially sell at the deadline, and maybe that's when he kind of puts his own fingerprints on his team and can kind of build the group that he wants versus kind of the group that he inherited. So, but yeah, I mean, they're trying everything. They're changing the starting lineup. They're playing the young guys more, and I think you're right. I would do that. I would kind of pivot. Klay Thompson's been struggling. It's been a really brutal year for them, and like, it has not gone how they expected. They were talking about contending entering the season. I think now, given what we've kind of seen through the first 25 games, they really have to make some changes and kind of change their approach.
Absolutely. And in the meantime, Bob Myers is sending postcards from Turks and Caicos saying, I've enjoyed my run. He's shining his rings up. He's getting new diamonds down there in the Caribbean, swapping them out every couple of months, just making sure they stay fresh. And while he waits for his next consulting job. So great job burning the bridge, as Charles Barkley said before it was too late. Now, to wrap this up, this is an NBA podcast. We touch on the league, the comings and goings, the highs and lows, and all of that with esteemed guests. But it is skewed a little bit towards a certain team. I don't know if you can tell. Now, on Friday, as we recap our highlights of the weekend, the Jalen Brunson 50-piece, man. A masterpiece, one for the ages. What were your thoughts? I don't know if you saw the game live. You caught up on it. What were your thoughts on the Brunson masterclass?
I am a huge Brunson fan. I think it's it's so much fun watching him coming into the league, I was a fan of his. So watching him kind of realize his potential and become this star level player, I think he should be a first time All-Star this year. I've been a big fan of what he's shown. And yeah, that 50-point game was so much fun. You know, the threes were falling. I don't know if you saw the video. I retweeted it. I think it was yesterday, but the video that showed the work that him and his dad kind of put
Yeah.
in when he was a
Yeah.
kid, and
Down at
then
NBA New
seeing
York.
it.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
that was so cool. I love that. So
Yeah.
I'm really happy for Jalen. You know, obviously we saw last year he emerged as a star, but to take it to another level this year has been really cool to watch. To be able to do it with his dad, you know, coaching has been awesome. And yeah, I mean, I was just someone that felt like Dallas never should have let him go. I was very surprised.
Yeah.
So I mean, it worked out really well for you guys. But I've been a huge fan of his, and it's fun to watch what he's doing. This Knicks team is really interesting because,
Yeah.
you know, offensively, we see, you know, they can put up points and they have pieces there, but then just defensively, you alluded to it earlier, they've been struggling so much. Losing Mitchell Robinson is huge just
Yeah.
because, you know, that's only going to make things worse defensively. I saw a stat on NBA.com that the Knicks recently, I think over the last 2 weeks, they've been like 28th or 29th in opponent turnovers, and then they've been dead last in defensive rebounding.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I think it started a little bit in the last few games with Robinson, and then without Robinson, it's gotten even worse. So I think it helps the Knicks that there's only, I would say, 7 teams in the East that I'm really scared of. Like Cleveland, now they're going to be without Darius Garland for a while. Evan
Yeah.
Mobley's going to be out for a while, so they're going to fall down the standings. Brooklyn, I don't really know what to think of this Brooklyn team. I'm not thinking of them as, you know, one of the top teams in the East. Toronto could be a seller at the deadline. You know, who knows with them, I guess, because in the
Right.
past we saw there was all the rumors about Pascal and OG, and then they just didn't make a move, except for making a win now move and acquiring Jakob Poeltl. But I think this could be the year that we see Toronto blow it up and move some of those
Mm.
guys. So yeah, I mean, and then after that, you get to like Atlanta, Chicago. I think the top 7 is pretty set. So if I'm New York, I'm, you know, feel pretty good about my chances in the East, even though defensively things have been pretty rough. And I'd imagine there'll be some internal improvement on that end. They're not going to be this bad going forward, but yeah, it's an interesting team going forward. I guess, what are your thoughts defensively and what they can do?
Oh, they're getting gashed right now, man. I'm very concerned. I'm very concerned. I'm not gonna lie to you. You know, the Robinson loss is major, and also the combined with the fact that, again, Brunson's great offensive dynamo, but both he and Julius Randle are below average defenders. Now,
Yeah,
when they want to get up for it, the thing about Brunson is it's not a lack of effort. I think it's just, you know, the limitations, whether it's
yeah,
lack of foot speed, lack of overall height, and
size, yeah.
then with Randall, it's like, you know, there's some points where he's locked in, lockjaw, and then there's other nights where it's just like, man, he forgets that a guy's like right behind him. You know what I mean? So
Hmm.
he just has those lapses year after year after year, and when your best 2 players aren't great defenders, I think it just sets a bad tone for the team. And then on top of that, you moved your best perimeter defender to the bench because he was struggling offensively in Quentin Grimes for bringing in DiVincenzo. So now you've weakened your starting unit defensively again, while your two best perimeter defenders in Emmanuel Quickly and Quentin Grimes are coming off the bench. Now with Quickly, he's going to close games. He's going to close every game. That's not a problem. So, you know, who starts, it's more on who finishes. I get that. But just throughout the games, especially in that first quarter, the early third, things kind of get out of control fast for the Knicks. And I'm not so sure they're going to be able to recover until Mitchell Robinson comes back.
Yeah, and they're saying what, like 2 months maybe that he could be
Could
out?
be,
Is that?
could be February before you see Mitchell Robinson.
Yeah, that's brutal. And I'm not sure again what kind of move is even out there potentially to make in terms of, again, we mentioned like Isaiah Stewart could be available. There's like guys out there that are available, but I'm not sure there's like a quick fix answer. So
Yeah,
you almost have to just beat teams in shootouts and hope that the offense
right.
is good enough and that you beat up on enough bad teams and can, you know, stay in that top 7 in the East. But again, I feel like pretty confident that they're going to, just because
Yeah,
the East is pretty bad toward the bottom, I would say.
yeah. Well, after this month, because they've had the hardest schedule in the league this month, they still finish this month at OKC, at the Magic, at Pacers. So
Yeah.
it's been a brutal month. They had only 3 out of their 14 games this month will be at home. 2 of those games will be against Milwaukee. So they play Milwaukee on
Yeah, I saw that.
they play
That's
Milwaukee on
brutal.
Friday, and then they play them Saturday, and then they play them on Christmas Day on Monday. So
I have a question for you. What's the
yeah.
perception of Julius Randle now amongst Knicks fans? Because I had like Tommy Beer on my show about a
Yeah, shout
month
out my
ago,
guy.
and yeah, he was saying it's like a love-hate relationship.
Yeah.
Where does that kind of stand right now with Julius Randle?
I think it's mixed. I think it's very mixed. It's very polarizing and almost split down the middle. You have those who say, look, this has been our best player in 5 years for the last 5 years. Statistically, he's going to go down as one of the best Knicks of all time, statistically. Now, maybe not in the win column, but certainly on the points and the boards and the 3-point shooting, he's going to be in that top 10 across the board. And
Yeah,
so there are fans of the fan base who appreciate the productivity, his durability, and him kind of just trying to be that guy for the Knicks. Now you have your other side who don't believe he'll perform in a big spot, have seen 2 lackluster playoff runs with the Knicks with him at the helm, and don't believe he can be that guy. And so for a franchise that hasn't won the championship in 50 years, out of the last 20 years, have only had maybe 2 winning seasons. It's been a lot of losing. There's a lot of negativity. There's a lot of pessimism in terms of the future outlook of the team. And with him kind of wearing that jersey of being the guy, yeah, Brunson's here, but Randall's, 1A, 1A.
yeah,
There's pessimism there. And so it's you lose patience because you know that he's a very good player. He's an all-star, all NBA player, but he can only take you to a certain level. And that's not necessarily his fault. I mean, you look at
yeah.
the NBA, there's only but so many guys that have been able to do so. It's just where they are right now. And so fans are losing patience because they don't know where the next help is going to come from that's going to really take them over the top. So I think that's just
Right.
what the team is right now.
That makes a lot of sense, and I do agree, in the right role, like, if he was a 3rd option on a top team, then, that's probably a better fit, and I also think he's an interesting spot where I've talked to Tommy about this. I think the Knicks value him more than maybe, like, what other teams would be willing to give up for him in a trade,
Yeah.
so, again, you have some fans I know that are like, "Oh, get this guy off the team, trade him," but I don't know that the return would be what the Knicks would want, like, their asking price wouldn't match what
You're
he would
never
be
going to get
offering.
equal value. That's
Right, with the playoff losses and some of the issues there, like, I think you almost have to keep him and just hope you can put another star in the team and he fits that role better than the role he's currently in. What would you make of the situation, or the comments that were made about Donovan Mitchell and how he's not, really the guy and how he's not gonna move the needle enough and they need to find someone, kind of better than Mitchell if they're gonna make that kind of move?
I agree with it. I think it was Scott Perry who said it.
Yes, it
And
was.
he was right in the mix when the 2 teams were negotiating. I definitely agree. Like, is Donovan Mitchell, a top 3 franchise changing player? No. But when he gets here in a tandem with Brunson offensively, will they take it to another level? Absolutely, I believe so. And he gives you another bona fide, trusted scoring threat that you can rely on, and another guy that can play make. I mean, with Garland and those guys being down with Cleveland, you're seeing Donovan Mitchell, he just had 13 assists the other night for Cleveland. So now the thing that's interesting is that the debate is, are he and Garland a good tandem together with Cleveland, because you see that without each other, they tend to play better. So
Yep.
having 2 ball dominant guards in your backcourt, will that work? It's questionable. Defensively, having 2 shorter guards in your backcourt with Brunson's deficiency, will that work? Questionable. I'm more so of the mindset of, he's a great talent, bring him in, figure it out later.
Mm.
But I think he ultimately finds his way out of Cleveland. Will the Knicks get back involved? I think they'll try. I'd be leery about Miami. I still think Riley will try
Yeah.
to make a move at some point. But yeah, I would certainly take Donovan Mitchell on this team, even though I still feel like even with him, they'll still need more work to be real, to be a legitimate team.
Yeah, I think that was a tough one too, because you had all of the emotions that kind of come with him being like a New York fan and stuff like that, and all the Mets stuff and everything. So it's like, oh, that's our guy. We got to go get him. But yeah, I think you bring up a lot of great points. And like you look at the Cleveland roster, there's a lot you can kind of point to. The fact that they are still struggling when they have that backcourt and then Evan Mobley and Jarrett Allen behind them, says a lot. Like there's definitely limitations there. And you look at, I mean, Cleveland, they've obviously had injuries recently, but they're eighth in the East right now.
Mhm.
So I see where Scott Perry's coming from with that comment. And Scott was, in Orlando for a long time too. So
Yeah.
I respect him. I think he knows this game really well and does a good job. But yeah, I don't know. I think this New York, I will say I think New York's very attractive for star players. And for a while there, that was something that people were questioning. Like, do you guys want to go to New York? There was the James Dolan stuff and all that. But I think this front office has done a really good job kind of making it an attractive destination again. And guys want to play there. They want to go be part of what's happening in New York. So I wouldn't be surprised if in the next, year or two, we see them land another big fish. And
Yeah.
kind of like you said, then Jalen Brunson can kind of move into that secondary role. Maybe Julius Randle kind of fits better when you have a star player, a superstar player that's, on the team. Yeah, I mean, I think they're doing the right things. They have a team that is good, that is,
Yeah.
a top 5, top 6 team in the East. That's going to attract someone. So I think it's only a matter of time. And when you're a team like New York, or you're one of the teams in LA, when you're in those big markets, you have to do it that way. Like, obviously,
Yeah.
you want to be able to build through the draft too, and find guys and have homegrown talents. But anytime, that's such an advantage to be in a big market and have that kind of appeal. So I think, it's the right thing to do. And I think it's only a matter of time until they are able to land that big fish.
Another $5 super chat from the Rhyme Animal Chuck D, who says, by March, so many players are going to be beat up and injured and done. We got to stay conditioned, competitive, and lucky, because teams are going to get worn out. Hey, it's an endurance test, man.
Yeah.
It's absolutely an endurance test, man.
One of my
So,
favorite things is talking to young players who have never played an 82 game schedule before. Like, I talked to
mm,
Paolo about this, and he was just talking about how hard it is. You don't realize,
mm,
you come in, you're like, yeah, it's some more games than I've played before. But like by, the end of the season, guys are worn out.
yeah,
Even just like the travel itself. You don't think about it, but traveling every other night and then having to
right,
play a game and then get right back on a plane, like that is almost a full-time job in
yeah,
and of itself. And
yeah,
obviously these guys are paid the big bucks. Like, it's what you're paid for. But when you're a young player who's not used to that, by like the second half of the season, like last year, Paolo had a horrible shooting slump in the second half of the season. And he admitted, he's like, I am exhausted. Like, I am
mm,
not used to this. So over the offseason, he worked on that a lot and tried to basically get, better conditioned, but also just, adjust more to the travel and get used to kind of that long schedule, because it is extremely difficult if guys aren't used to it. And that's where, again, sleep, nutrition, that stuff comes, it becomes really important.
important.
And a lot of times guys don't take that stuff seriously until they're veterans and until they have to, because
Yeah,
they need to do it to stay in the league. When guys figure that out when they're younger and, are in the prime of their life, the peak of their career, that's when you see guys really take a step forward. And yeah, I think you're definitely onto something there. That's definitely a factor. The teams that can handle that the best are the ones that are near the top of the standings and enter the playoffs fresh.
yeah, no question about it, man. Salute to everybody in the chat. Once again, hit that thumbs up button for you boys. CP the franchise, Alex Kennedy on the ones and twos. Guys, remember that this show is presented by PrizePicks, daily fantasy made easy. Go to PrizePicks for your chance to win up to 25 times your money. That's by going to prizepicks.com. Use promo code NBAR for a first time deposit match up to $100. And how you play PrizePicks, it's very easy. You're going to pick between 2 to 6 players. You can mix and match between different sports. Obviously, you have NFL going on. You have the Monday Night Football games going on, NBA, which we play here. But there are a number of sports that you can choose from and a number of stats that you can choose from. And all you're going to do is predict whether or not the player that you choose is going to do more or less than the given stat projection for that night. Now, one thing for you guys that haven't played yet, take advantage of PrizePicks' NBA Christmas Day promotion, because right now the Christmas Day promotion is Kevin Durant at 0.5 points. You have the Phoenix Suns, who will be taking on, who are they taking on Christmas Day? I believe Dallas. Kevin Durant, 0.5 points is the promotion. So go ahead and lock that in right now, because that's basically an automatic win for you. So make sure you guys lock that in. Now, here's where I'm going for tonight's docket. You know, Alex and I were just talking about our guy, Jalen Brunson, Captain Clutch. You got the Knicks looking to rebound, still in LA at the Crypto.com Arena, and they will take on the Los Angeles Lakers for our game of the week. And I'm going with Jalen Brunson with more than 25 points in this game. My second pick, Donovan Mitchell. And this one is a good one, man. Donovan Mitchell without Darius Garland, without Evan Mobley. You've got the Cleveland Cavaliers taking on the Houston Rockets. They're in Cleveland tonight. I'm going with Donovan Mitchell with more than 6 assists. He's got a lot more on his hands in terms of running this offense. Without Garland, his backcourt mates dropped 13 assists in Cleveland's previous game. I'm going with Donovan Mitchell again, more than 6 assists. Back to Knicks and Lakers. I'm going with Julius Randle, man, with more than 37.5 points, rebounds, and assists. You know, Randle didn't have his best go against the Clippers on the second night of a back-to-back. But one thing about Julius Randle is that he has a lot of bounce back and resilient games. He's going to be up for this one in his former building against his boy Anthony Davis, against LeBron James. I'm going with Julius Randle, more than 37.5 points, rebounds, and assists. Again, with no Mitchell Robinson, there's a lot on Julius Randle's plate, and I think he's going to bounce back, including a better shooting performance. So there's Randle there. And lastly, I got to go with the process, man. Joel Embiid with more than 52.5 points, rebounds, and assists with Philadelphia hosting the Chicago Bulls. Joel Embiid is playing at an MVP level. He is dominating, and he's dominating more so inside. He's getting it popping in the paint right now, and there's nobody that can keep themselves in front of Joel Embiid right now. So I'm going to continue with the Joel Embiid hot streak, and that's where I'm going tonight, man. Joel Embiid with more than 52.5 points, rebounds, and assists. Remember to play to win, well, play responsibly. Go to PrizePicks.com and use our code MBAR for an instant deposit match of up to $100. Alex, great show, man.
Thank you for having me, man. That was awesome.
Absolutely, man. Thanks for coming on. Thanks for sharing some insight. I always love to have people in here. I mean, you're in the locker rooms, you're talking to the players, you're getting firsthand accounts. So I appreciate you coming on here and sharing that, man. And we got to do this again, man. It's a long season, so hopefully you come back at different intervals and we'll do a couple more check-in reports, man. Thanks again.
Anytime, man. Like I said, I'm a huge fan of what you've built. It's awesome, and I'm always down to come on. Just let me know.
Absolutely. Let the people know where they can find you. You just dropped a piece on ESPN, so let them know about that and let them know your social tags.
Yeah, you can find all my work at Alex Kennedy NBA. That's where Running Up the Score airs. I tweet out my articles. I just had my first ESPN article go up looking at the NBA's leaders in technical fouls, the career leaders. So that's pinned on my account right now. And yeah, check out all my articles at ESPN. Check out Running Up the Score podcast and give me a follow on Twitter or X, whatever. And appreciate you guys for checking it out.
Absolutely, man. And for you people at home, remember that these shows are available in audio podcast format. No reason to miss it. So if you missed it live, salute to the replay gang, but you can also catch it on all major podcast platforms. Tonight, we will be live on Knicks Fan TV for our game of the week, Knicks versus Lakers. Play-by-play live, so make sure you guys tap into that as well. CP the Franchise, Alex Kennedy. We out of here, man. Thanks again, everybody.